My name is Valerie Burns, and I used to run the systems that ran the company. That's not an exaggeration or a metaphor. At Norwest Strategy Group, a boutique advisory firm in DC, I spent 14 years building the operational backbone, the workflows, compliance grids, internal controls, onboarding protocols, client auditing templates, internal knowledge bases. You name it. Every screw in that machine clicked because I made it click. I wasn't the face of the company. That was always a man in a blazer with a strong handshake and a rehearsed laugh. But I was the one who reminded him when his suit was wrinkled, and who printed the pitch deck he forgot on the hotel printer, and who told the client, "He'll be with you shortly," even though he was just waking up hungover 2 blocks away. I never complained. Not once. I liked the work. I liked building things. I liked being invisible until it mattered. The problem is, when you do your job too well for too long, people start to think you're just part of the furniture. Something static. Something replaceable. That became crystal clear the day they brought in Lincoln Marlowe. He was 31. Stanford MBA. Ex-McKinsey, ex-something crypto. He wore all birds with $800 blazers and told everyone to call him Link. He had a neck tattoo in Mandarin and described his leadership style as disruptively empathetic. His first day, he spent 3 hours talking about liberating team dynamics through de-hierarchical structures. On his second day, he asked if I could pop down to Starbucks for him. Oat milk, no foam, 2 pumps. I said no. He laughed. He thought I was joking. I wasn't. That should have been the first sign. By week 3, he'd renamed the internal server the Mind Cloud, moved the HR department into the People Ecosystem, and fired the IT director because he was giving off legacy energy. I wasn't worried. Not yet. I've seen men like him before, sleek, dangerous in a way they don't understand themselves to be, and absolutely convinced that their vision is revolutionary because no one's ever said no to them with consequences. Men like Link don't bother me. What bothered me was what came next. He asked to restructure my role. We were in a glass conference room, the kind of place designed to look transparent while amplifying every moment of humiliation like a stage. I've been reviewing some of the organizational charts, Val, and honestly, it's unclear what it is you actually do here, he said, smiling like he was doing me a favor. A lot of what you're describing seems historic. Legacy systems. Outdated protocols. I wrote those protocols, I said. Exactly, he replied, like that proved his point. He told me we needed to be leaner. More fluid. More future-ready. He asked if I'd consider staying on as Senior Systems Liaison, a title that meant nothing, reporting to someone with half my experience, no budget authority, and a $42,000 pay cut. I said I'd think about it. I didn't. The next day, my email access was downgraded. I couldn't approve vendor invoices anymore. Couldn't see the project dashboards I built. Couldn't even access the SPs I created. The files had been duplicated, renamed, and moved under a new directory titled Reorg 2.0. They'd even changed the file authorship metadata. My name was gone. Now it just said, created by admin. They wanted me erased. Not just moved aside or removed. But here's the thing about treating invisible people like they're disposable. We remember everything. And we know exactly where all the wires are buried. So I started documenting. Not emotionally. Not angrily. Systematically. Every botched invoice. Every HR complaint that got closed without action. Every client file where compliance fields were missing. I printed backup copies, noted metadata timestamps, flagged violations. I started connecting the dots on backdated approvals and retroactive contract changes. Things that didn't add up. Things that, in a federal contracting firm, couldn't not add up. And I kept quiet. Let them think they'd won. One afternoon, I got a Slack from Maya, the new junior PM Link had brought in from his last startup. Hey Val. Quick question, what does a Form 1964C look like? Link said you'd know. I stared at the message. Smiled. They pulled me from the engine room but forgot I was the only one who knew how to fly the plane. I sent her the form. Blank. Unlabeled. Just to see what she'd do. She thanked me and disappeared. 20 minutes later, I got a call from compliance. Did you tell the new PM to submit an unverified 1964C? No, I said calmly. She asked me what one looks like. They sighed. It was submitted to a federal subcontractor. Wrong codes. It triggered a red flag in the review system. Of course it did. Because it was a test. And they failed. But still I said nothing. Because when you've spent years being the person who catches things before they fall apart, You learn to wait for the exact moment when silence becomes a weapon. That moment came sooner than I expected. It was the quarterly leadership review, a big Zoom show for our board and capital partners. Link was leading. He had slides, music, a theme. Reimagining the possible. I watched from the digital back row, camera off, muted. Like a ghost. He was 11 minutes in when the spreadsheet started glitching. First, the margin numbers didn't match. Then a formula threw up a #ref. Error. Then someone in the comments typed, "These projections don't align with last quarter's deliverables." Someone else added, "Why is the August compliance audit labeled closed when the firm didn't pass phase 2? Link froze. I saw his eyes dart. Slide by slide, more errors. Inconsistencies. Red flags. And no one was stepping in to save him because no one left knew how it was supposed to work. That's when the board chair cleared her throat and said, "Valerie, are you on this call?" A pause. Link looked around like he'd seen a ghost. "I am muted." "Yes." The moment I unmuted, the energy in the Zoom changed. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't make a scene. I just said, "I'm here." And that was enough. The board chair, Meredith King, a woman who never smiled but always remembered birthdays, nodded. "Good. Valerie, can you please walk us through why these numbers aren't aligning?" Link didn't say a word. Just shifted in his chair, tried to recover his smile, then gave one of his signature lines. "This is probably a formatting issue. I'll sync with Val offline and get it sorted." That's when I smiled. Not because he used Val like we were on familiar terms, but because he didn't realize what I was about to do. "No need," I said. "We can go through it now." And then I shared my screen. I pulled up the archived dashboards. The original budgetary controls. The compliance trail logs. The vendor approvals with altered timestamps. I showed them the metadata on Form 1964C, submitted under Maya's login but pre-filled using macros I had disabled months ago, meaning they were working off stolen, outdated templates. Every error was a receipt. Every omission was traceable. I wasn't trying to be dramatic. I was just showing them the truth. Link tried to cut me off twice. Said I was misrepresenting the new strategy rollouts. Said I was bringing personal grievances into an institutional conversation. So I brought out the big one. The Audit K folder. Password protected. Logged under my compliance clearance. Created 2 years ago when I started noticing subtle inconsistencies. Signatures that didn't match user sessions. Vendor forms that were signed hours before meetings allegedly happened. Emails confirming deliverables that were never delivered. And at the bottom of the list, an invoice trail that led to a shell consultancy registered to an address in Virginia, billed 3 times in Q3 for strategic onboarding facilitation. The payee? Marlowe Holdings LLC. Link froze. The board didn't. Valerie, Meredith said, eyes locked on mine. "Can you send this documentation directly to me and our counsel?" "Already in your inbox." By the next morning, Link's keycard didn't work. His Slack account was deactivated. His email bounced. Officially, he resigned to pursue new ventures in the startup space. Unofficially, he was walked out by security and left his expensive thermos on the desk. Everyone expected me to feel vindicated, to walk back in like a returning general. I didn't, because the damage wasn't just him. It was the culture that let him rise. After Link's exit, people started treating me differently, overly apologetic, overly cautious. As if I might snap or gloat or pull some grand "I told you so." But I didn't want revenge. I wanted accountability. So I sat down with HR, with legal, with finance. I laid out a plan, not just to clean up the mess, but to rebuild what we'd broken. I called it Project Ground Truth. Not a rebrand, not a new system, just a return to clarity. We started small, restoring audit trails, realigning job descriptions with actual responsibilities, reinstating the original knowledge base. I created a versioning protocol so no one could accidentally overwrite core files again. We documented everything. And still, I didn't take a promotion. I didn't want one. The board offered. Multiple times. They said I'd earned a leadership title. Said it was time to put a woman at the front. But I knew what they meant. They meant, "Now that it's broken, will you hold the wheel so we don't get sued?" I declined. "I'm not here for the title," I said. "I'm here so it doesn't happen again." Then about 6 weeks after Link's exit, Maya knocked on my door. Literally knocked, even though we were a remote-first company. "I need to talk," she said. I waved her in. She stood, holding her laptop like a shield. I didn't know, she blurted. About the forms. The macros. I thought it was a normal workflow, and Link said you were checked out and that you'd been blocking innovation. She was shaking. I'm sorry I didn't come to you first. I stared at her for a long second. Thought about what it meant to be young, ambitious, and manipulated by people who use charm like camouflage. And then I said, sit down. I'll show you how it actually works. She cried. Not loud. Just a few silent, sharp tears. I made coffee. We didn't talk about it again. That moment, more than the board meeting or the fallout, was what stuck with me. Because that's how it happens, isn't it? Rot creeps in through silence. Through small compromises. Through the people who know better but keep their mouths shut. So I made a choice. If no one else was going to build a culture of deliberate integrity, I would. Not by becoming a chief something officer, but by teaching, mentoring, documenting, by making transparency scalable. We built a quiet coalition, people who'd seen the cracks and felt the weight of being the only adult in the room. A data analyst in Atlanta, a contract specialist in Phoenix, an intern who'd been pressured to falsify timesheets and almost quit because of it. We started meeting off hours. We called ourselves the maintainers. Not heroes. Not rebels. Just people who kept the lights on while the spotlight spun elsewhere. We wrote handbooks. We hosted quiet teach-ins. We rebuilt the onboarding program to include ethics protocols from day one, not as legal jargon, but as lived experience. And one night, over pizza in a Zoom breakout room, someone asked, Val, why didn't you just leave? You could have gone anywhere. I thought about it. Then said, because leaving doesn't fix the building. And someone needs to fix the building. About 3 months later, a message popped up in my inbox. Subject line, from the chairman. It was Meredith. She wrote, there are things we still don't say out loud. Like how close we came to collapse. Like how many of us saw something but said nothing. Thank you for not staying silent. We'd like you to present Project Ground Truth to the National Summit this fall. Full speaker slot. No approval needed. Just say yes. I stared at the email for a long time. Not because I was surprised, but because I realized something I hadn't let myself feel. I wasn't invisible anymore. Not because they finally saw me, but because I made sure what I built could speak for itself. The National Summit was held in Denver. Ballroom with too much glass. Lanyards, badges, hushed hallway gossip. The kind of place where everyone smiles but no one listens unless you're already someone. I wasn't someone. Not to them. I was the woman who didn't quit. The woman who stuck around after the scandal. The one who, as one VP whispered in the bathroom line, was weirdly obsessed with documentation. I didn't care. I wasn't there to impress them. I was there to make it impossible for them to say they didn't know better. My talk was scheduled for 3:45 p.m. Bad slot. People already checking out, eyeing flights. Didn't matter. I walked on stage wearing the same black blazer I wore the day I unmuted in that Zoom call, the day Link's empire started to burn. No slides. Just a name. Valerie Burns. Senior Systems Integrity Analyst. Yes, still. I started like this. They say systems break slowly, then all at once. But I don't think that's true. Systems don't break. People stop maintaining them. I told them everything. Not the scandal, not in a salacious way. I told them about small things. A policy edited without version control. An intern asked to fake numbers. A signature used twice, slightly off. The story of Maya, the story of the dashboard, the story of how silence isn't neutral, it's complicit. I told them about how I didn't leave because I realized the thing no one likes to admit. The adults in the room are often waiting for someone else to go first. Then I said something that made the back row sit up. You don't need a title to be in charge of the truth. Afterward, people clapped. Not out of obligation, out of recognition. Some stayed behind. A woman from Baltimore told me she left her job last year because she tried to report compliance issues and was iced out of meetings until she just stopped being invited. A man from Oakland asked if he could borrow my onboarding framework. Another just said, thank you for saying it out loud. Back home, nothing changed overnight. No ticker tape parade. No viral post. The company went on. Quarterly reports. Town halls. Slack huddles. PowerPoints with words like synergy and velocity. But the core? The core was better. Not because it was fixed. Because it was still being maintained. Maya became our new internal training lead. She designed a new role called Process Historian, just to make sure no decision ever again got made without context. HR launched a red flag channel, monitored by an external firm. No more closed loops. Even the board started a quarterly truth session anonymous reporting. Always chaired by someone not an ops. It didn't make the company perfect, but it made it self-aware. One night, almost a year later, I got a package. No return address. Inside, a single plaque. Blackwood. No logos. No signatures. Just engraved text. Thank you for staying in the room. No one ever admitted sending it. Didn't matter. I put it on the bottom shelf, next to the binder of original workflows I built 5 years ago. Next to the first notebook where I scribbled out the phrase Audit K. A reminder. Not of power. Of purpose. Because here's what no one tells you when you're a woman in tech. Or a black woman in systems. Or just someone who knows what good looks like and has to watch it get ignored. You don't get to be the hero. You don't get applause. You don't get protection. What you get is the choice. Stay and protect the standard. Or leave and hope someone else does. I stayed. Not because I wanted to, but because if I left, the silence would win. And I've learned. Silence is where rock grows. The company never named a system after me. No one built a statue. But 3 months ago, a woman I'd never met, a junior analyst from another department, sent me a Slack message at 11:13 p.m. She wrote, "Hey, someone just asked me to override a QA flag on a form and submit it as is. Said you'd be okay with it. I don't think that's true. Am I right?" I stared at that message for a long time. Smiled. Typed back, "You're right. Let's talk tomorrow." She replied with a single emoji. And that, maybe more than anything, is what I'll leave behind. Not a legacy. Not a title. But a blueprint. So the next woman who walks into that room doesn't have to burn it down. She can just walk in knowing. The light is already on.